Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished branding and marketing professional from Boston, USA, Cat Holt. Cat, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so great to be here on your fantastic podcast.
Thank you. Kat is the founder and chief brand officer of Coologee Inc. So, Kat, my first question for you, you worked with some of the most recognizable brands in the world. What first sparked your passion for brand strategy?
I have always been curious about what makes people tick. I think it comes from growing up with a bit of an empath side
Hmm.
to myself and an insatiable curiosity.
Hmm.
I also am an artist and musician.
Wow.
And I ended up studying psychology at Brown and realized that being a counselor or a researcher wasn't quite for me.
Hmm.
And I was very confused about what to do. And my
Hmm.
advisor said, "Hey, you have psychology, you are creative, you should go into advertising."
Hmm.
And I was fortunate enough that it was a little bit of a while ago. And at the time, Volkswagen was doing some amazing work
Hmm.
that was very much about brand as badge or brand as being something you could belong to. And it was when they were doing work like the Pink Moon work or the Trio work, the synchronicity of the windshield wipers, very, very great creative
Yeah.
back in the
Yeah.
90s, 2000s.
Hmm.
And I thought, you know what? I'd like to do something like that.
Amazing.
And I've been doing it ever since.
Absolutely. And as they say, the rest is history.
And the rest
Yeah.
is, well, hopefully not done yet. Let's keep
No,
on
not at
making it,
all.
right?
I've been a marketing branding person for over 4 decades.
Well
And
done.
it's a fascinating area to be in. But
Mm.
moving on, you were behind the Dr. Rick campaign of Progressive Insurance, and that has become a bit of a cultural phenomenon. What Tell me about the campaign and what were some of the lessons you took away?
Well, it's interesting because more times than not, you don't actually know you're making the thing that's
Correct.
that's going to spark some kind of interest. And
Hmm.
I was extraordinarily lucky in that I had been working on progressive strategy at Arnold in Boston and ended up, as I call it, trading teams or sides. I ended
Hmm.
up taking over all the marketing strategy at Progressive, moving my family to Cleveland. And my colleagues, an incredibly talented team at Arnold, were still working with me. So it was the best of both worlds.
Hmm.
Um, we needed to start to shift our brand strategy at Progressive because Flow had been around for a long time, still incredibly successful, but the younger people had been growing up with her.
Hmm.
And so on its launch, with its initiation, Flow felt fresh and young. But a decade later, she felt like, well, that's like my mom.
Hmm.
And so young people um, didn't relate as much. And so when we decided we needed to go after the young homeowners, um, we had to take a different approach.
Hmm.
And the reality is too that flow is great, but it has kind of like this isn't too hard. This is a little bit of as easy as going to a retail store and buying something. Whereas, and that's right for auto, but that's not right for home insurance. Because if you think about home insurance for young people, it's the biggest purchase that they will make in
Hmm.
most cases.
Yeah,
And I remember the first time that I signed on a mortgage, I was
I
terrified,
know.
and it felt like everything had changed. I felt like I didn't know what the script was for this book of growing up. And that's kind of where the notion came from, which is, hey, when you own a home, things change. And working with a team came up with the notion of the grown-up switch,
Hmm.
and then what happens around that. And oftentimes, we look to those that were responsible role models in our lives, and they were often our parents.
Amazing.
And we love to make I mean, I have three teenage girls. My oldest is starting her first year in college.
Mhm.
They love to roast me
Mm.
about being a mom. And I found myself, in the younger years when I had my children, I've caught myself being like my parents. But it was the team in our role that said, well, why don't we create that as a disease and have a
Mm.
therapist that does the interventions, and then elevating Dr. Rick as the main character just ended up working. And it's been around. My 17-year-old reminded me that she was 7 when that campaign launched. So now it's been
10 years.
around for a minute.
Yeah, amazing. But I was also fascinated that you decided to use humor in the
Yes.
campaign, and it's very difficult to use humor, and you seem in advertising, and you seem to have done it brilliantly. How did you balance humor with a serious brand message of an insurance company?
Well, I want to remember because it's always good to give credit to the team. So I would say Sean McBride and his creative team
Mm.
were able to walk that path. But what we understood at the time, and I'm only growing to understand how important humor is, what we understood is that, people don't like to have sincere conversations about important things anymore. Call it postmodern, call it cynicism. But typically speaking, if you have a very sincere, emotionally direct conversation, 9 times out of 10, people are going to look at you like a newbie or
Mm.
naive or not capable.
Yeah.
And what I realize is that some of the great, most truthful insights are delivered on a stand-up stage. And the reality is, I always called it, it's funny because it's true. And it's easier to confront truths with
Mm.
humor than it is like straight
Correct.
on.
Correct.
And so that's why. And I've been doing a lot of work in the years since about the role of happiness
Correct.
in our ability to be open to new ideas and concepts. And it's a critical
Fascinating.
component. In
Fascinating.
fact, I'm embarking on some research to kind of prove that out
Mm.
right now with a research partner. But happiness, joy, humor, they're really important parts of storytelling that gets people to think differently.
Mm. And when humor works, it is probably got the highest recall. And you
It
seem to have
does.
done it very well with Dr. Riggs. Thank you. Let's now talk about Coologee. Coologee
Yes.
believes that brand isn't just a logo or a tagline, but a business asset. Tell me more about this, and how do you define that in practical terms?
Yeah, I'm so happy to be talking about this with you because I think, as you know, I kind of made it my mission to bring brand back into the focus for business executives, boards, and even investors. Um, and it's because I see such greater performance for
Mm.
organizations that have strong brand
Yeah.
formation, identity. And I've been able to prove, and I'm not the first, right? There have been a number of folks that have proven
Mhm.
that when you have a company that has a strong brand, stronger than the rest of the brands in your category, they outperform the competition pretty significantly on all measures, whether it's cash flow or valuation of stock relative to S&P. And the trick has been, how do you create that in a way, that measurement system, the ability to have correlation analysis that allows for brand to be monitored on a more ongoing and regular basis, similar to all of the KPIs executives use in dashboards to inform decisions.
Right.
Um, and that is not something that happens.
Hmm.
I have, as you said, worked for many, many brands. Even when I was at Progressive, I created the first brand and marketing scorecard
Hmm.
that was sent and shared enterprise wide.
Right.
Um, and even then, we didn't have the nuance and the fidelity in order to manage it as a business asset.
Mm.
Well, fast forward to right now, we do have the parts and pieces for it. And you have to knit together brand indicators from a number of different places. and then have some great analysts to help
Mm,
you make decisions about what do you do where and how do you do it. And it's
mm,
such an important factor right now.
fascinating. And what does build brands, protect brands mean in your day-to-day work?
Yeah. So if brand is a business asset,
Mhm.
which it is, then if you're building it, you have to be ready to protect it.
Correct.
And, it's two sides of the same coin. You have to have a really well developed reputation management, crisis management practice area. And you have to be ready for whatever a scenario might be. Now, you can't anticipate 100% of them, but you certainly can plan for 90%, 80%.
Mm,
We find that a lot of organizations don't have the plans in place so that when something pops up, and in recent months, we've seen a number of pretty brand damaging situations where whether it's the kiss bomb stuff at the Coldplay concert or
mm,
logos being changed.
yeah.
um, the longer it takes you to react to something, the more fuel you give to everybody else to take that story away from you.
Mm,
And organizations that are not ready and know how to react and have the processes in place, have the protocols in place, take too long.
absolutely.
And the longer it takes, the worse it gets. And
Mm,
so we find it's very, very important to be able to be ready for something like that. And frankly, protecting brand and reputation is more than just responding to
absolutely.
something. You
Well
have to
said.
you have to plant the seeds of a reputation so you at least have some kind of goodwill in the bank
Mm,
so that when there's a withdrawal, it's not your brand doesn't stand for that withdrawal only. You
mm,
have to have something else that has been nurtured in the channels where you
yeah.
have to respond to protect a brand. And so we do that. We have business and corporate communications, crisis planning, and in through partnerships, even government relations and lobbying and outreach.
Mm, interesting. You also talk about building brand ecosystems. How does
Mhm.
that differ from simply running a campaign?
Um, so I wish I could tell you that even big organizations are the only ones that are managing campaigns one campaign at a time, and left hand does not know what right hand
Yeah.
is doing.
Mhm.
But the truth is that's usually true no matter the size of the organization.
Mm,
And so when we think about brand as a business asset, it's not just about ads or stories that are out in the marketplace. It's about experiences that consumers, customers, prospects, partners end up going through with you. And since so much of our activity and our ability to interact and engage in brands is in a digital world, it has to be coordinated.
mm,
And so it's about integrating campaigns and efforts. It's about understanding how a value proposition, a position, a personality comes to life in websites and digital mobile apps and service cues and retail experiences. Because you can't just say you are something, you have to act to show that you are, because people believe the conclusions they come to through an experience more than the words you tell them.
mm,
And so understanding that brand also is a pillar in decisions around call centers and dining experiences and in bank experiences is a
mm,
critical part of this, and it all has to work together.
mm. Well said. And how does Coologee work in marketing change management
Mm.
uh, connect with its brand building philosophy?
What we're talking about right now isn't easy, right? It requires skill sets that sometimes it's hard to find because, if we think about the last 10, 15 years of marketing, majority of the new skill set that we're seeing, the rising leaders in marketing came in through digital marketing or direct marketing.
Mhm.
And that's important.
Yeah.
The idea of performance marketing has built the biggest brands that we have today. At the same time, the way those folks are trained, and I know I've been a part of this for my entire career, it's not about brand, right? It's more about getting that immediate response, which
Yeah.
is essentially triggering the lizard brain, right? We all still have the primitive brain structure in our brains, and it's about motion, action, fight, flight, very short term. And what we find is that organizations don't necessarily have the skill set in order to be able to understand how to bring brand into those types of operations. And, for better or worse, my career started during the dot-com boom, and advertising agencies were looking to rush into creating some kind of internet website
Mm,
branch.
mhm.
And I was there at the beginning, and my entire career has sat at the intersection of brand storytelling that would be what you expect from big ad
Yeah.
agencies,
Mm,
and then the digital behavior outcomes that you would expect from a digital or internet marketing, as they used to
mm,
call
mm,
it,
mm.
um, and trying to build those bridges between, which has morphed into change management,
Right.
to change team structures, to train up existing staff, to bring in new, whether it's an employee or staff member or partner,
Mm,
and helping everybody work together as one team. And just the action of making that feel safe, right? To have some safety and asking seasoned people to start to lead around something they've not done before, that's hard. And creating a team
yeah.
that does work together, because if brand is central, there has to be continuity around the
Mm, mm,
execution of that,
mm.
which means that we're asking people to spend a little bit longer to check in with their peers, their
Yeah.
counterparts, to have conversations, to do integrated strategic planning annually at the least, quarterly is better.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And so I've had the great fortune of doing major trade change transformation for 5 or 6 companies so far, and I have done it many times as Coologee, because it's something I have done, and the operations of it are as important as the strategy that's in a in
Mm.
a deck that you put on somebody's desk.
Absolutely. Great response. Can you also tell us about your approach to creating scalable brand platforms that work across channels over a period of time?
So what is part of this integration is knowing what you're doing and whether it's working,
Mm,
and brand is the destination. It's the opposite of like, I'm making great progress. If only I knew where I was going.
mm,
And so in order to measure the impact of brand, you have to be able to have coordinated measurement across all the different channels. And that actually means that you have to have a pretty sophisticated database. Sophistication does not mean outside of the reach of mid-market. It just means having it set up in a way where you can take the data that the media companies are providing with their own unique identifier, the website data that you have a unique identifier for, calls,
mm.
again, unique, into whatever the purchase or sales platform is, and finally into your CRM. Um, it is complicated only in that you have to take the time to think through it. But once you have an ability to link those data sets, you're able to see the whole picture. And the practice of going through that creates a very solid foundation
Mm,
for an organization to start investing more money in marketing, and then having the confidence that if they do,
mm.
the outcomes are being measured and managed. I always say we have to have two hands on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And so scale means doing more of something.
Mm,
Well, no organization, no executive leadership will give you more
mm.
if you can't say, and this is what we're going to achieve
Yeah.
with that
Yeah.
investment.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
that's really critical.
Mm. Well said. You're also developing the AI powered policy advocate platform for APCIA. My question is, how do you see AI changing branding and customer experience?
I love, I love what I do, because we have an opportunity
Yeah,
to test and learn and play around with the new things.
absolutely.
I spoke a bit about being at the forefront of the website and dot-com boom, this is the same thing.
Mm.
It's not going away. And the organizations and people who master it are the ones that will become the next great companies, the next great brands. And, we know where our core capabilities lie,
Mm.
which is in brand portfolio management, innovation in order to improve product portfolios or service portfolios. And the approach that we take is how might AI disrupt or um, make it difficult for you to deliver your value
Yeah,
proposition moving forward.
yeah.
And when you frame it in that mind, it changes how you think about AI.
Mm.
There's a lot of applications for AI within the data modeling. There's a lot within just generative AI for efficiency perspectives. Those are things we add it to the list, but that's not where we focus. We focus on creating applications that allow for a brand to continue to prove that value to its customer base
Mhm.
with the adoption of AI. So it's much more about creating the agents and then incorporating the other components like generative or making sure that there's a knowledge hub or that the data is available in a way that can be accessed and audited. And we've been having a lot of fun. I mean, everybody's at the forefront of this,
Very
so
interesting.
it's nice to be there and playing with them too.
Sure.
But again, it's a fulfillment of brand
I agree.
promise.
I,
Then, and that's how we approach it.
I agree. So, Kat, I have time for two more questions for you. For companies facing market turbulence, what's your first piece of advice on managing their brand?
It's to look at what is the core strength of your brand, um, and then identifying where the gaps are. And that sounds simplistic and obvious, but the reality is it's difficult to do, and many organizations don't.
Hmm.
And so, what I say to those organizations is brand is a belief that people have about who you are and how you're
Hmm.
going to operate in the marketplace. If you see a problem, if you see a missing piece or an opportunity that you have to go after in order to grow, don't just jump there.
Hmm.
I call it the hard right. Um, People don't follow the hard right
Hmm.
because you're one of many messages that they are going to
Yep.
receive. You have to bring them down a journey to get there. And hard rights will make it difficult for you to be successful.
Hmm.
And if you move away from your core identity, your values, your purpose, people aren't going to believe that you are what you said you were, let alone that you will be what you want to be next. And so I think that that's the challenge. I mean, granted, there are always exceptions, right? If you have billions and billions of dollars to throw
Hmm.
back against an effort, you can slog through it, but it's an expensive decision to make.
Absolutely.
And there's always a way to kind of weave the story so that you're not divorced from what you were,
Hmm.
but also taking advantage of the next opportunity.
Well said. And my last question for you, Kat, given the vast experience and understanding you have of branding, and the fact that technology is now coming, and as you said, it's here to stay, as you look ahead, what trends do you see shaping brand strategy over the next few years?
It's interesting. I had a conversation recently about how much we as humans are craving like the silence
Mhm.
and the space because we are bombarded and the pace that we will be working at thanks to AI is breakneck. I know because I'm doing it all the time. And
Yeah.
I find it to be,
Mhm.
I work on a lot of things. I'm pretty fast.
Yeah.
That was before AI,
Mhm.
right? So I was pretty good at riding a bike and
Yeah.
now I have an
Yeah.
e-bike. So I can go further faster.
Correct.
Um, and it feels good in the moment. And then you get done with your day and it's exhausting.
Hmm.
And I think what's going to happen is there's going to be more hyper focus within the daytime, within platforms like AI, where you just kind of go down that rabbit hole.
Hmm.
You're generating, creating, distributing. And then you get home and you just don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
You don't want to have that bombardment. And I think we're going to see a lot more shutting off of devices, a lot more walks in the woods, that analog time with friends, which means that we as people are going to start putting the blinders on.
Mm.
Uh, and brands are going to have to adjust
Yeah.
because if they contribute to the fatigue, they're not going to win. And
Mm.
how they can be part of the silence as much as
Yeah.
the noise
Mm.
is going to be critical, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, I just want to say, Kat, what an amazing conversation this has been on branding. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. I think the amount of learning we all got as your viewers and listeners about the Dr. Rick's insurance campaign was absolutely fascinating. I'm sure it must be a case study in many, many institutions, and I'm sure one of these days we'll see a book coming out from you. Thank you also for speaking to me about so many different aspects of Coologee, branding, brand strategy, technology, and marketing. Thank you again for
Thanks for
speaking to me, and
having
good luck.
me. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.